Welcome, viewers, to Champions Network TV. Today we are discussing the geopolitical position of Zimbabwe and what implication it has. And today, to unpack this, I'm joined with Shumba Nyamziwa David, who is a geopolitical strategist who is much interested in history, politics, and the monetary economics. And today he is going to take us through the geopolitical position of Zimbabwe. Over to you, Shumba.
Thanks so much, Misha. Yeah, so I think I would want to start with where we are in the world, how and where Zimbabwe fits into the whole picture. So the world now is, I think we are at an inflection point in world history. Where we are now is akin to the start of the First and Second World War. So what happened between the start of the First and Second World War? You had a rising Germany challenging the hegemonic control of the British Empire. So if you go back in history, you'll find that whenever a rising power comes up and challenges the hegemony of the existing power, it normally ends up in a hot war. So we are sort of in that period. God forbid that we end up in a hot war, because right now we have got the rising power. We've got a rising power, China, challenging the hegemonic control of the existing power, which is the US. So all you'll see now is the US is going round to try to contain China. But whether it will achieve that, it's another story. So this is where the conflict begins, because what happened was, after the end of the Second World War, we entered a period where one power sort of, initially it was two powers. You had the Soviet and the Soviet Union and America remaining as the two protagonists, or the two world powers. And then when the USSR fell apart, then you had a unipolar world where America, or the US, became the global power and had global dominance. It puts its rules in place so that all the countries would abide by those rules of international trade, finance, and things like that, and the politics. And it enforced most of these things through the use of its military. For me, from researching from history, America is the biggest military power that has ever existed, with over 700 military bases across the world. No one has achieved this kind of scale in terms of military dominance. So you look at the Roman Empire, it never really reached to that extent. So this is the world where we are living in. So when we got into the unipolar world after the fall of the USSR, America became the dominant power. And you read people like Fukuyama saying it's the end of history. What he meant by the end of history was saying there is not going to be any power, because from his own look at history, he saw the dominance of America, and so he didn't see any other power that would rise to challenge that dominance. But obviously things changed when China was brought into the World Trade Organization, and China started to rise up. Nobody foresaw that China would be where it is today. The, the idea in the West was China would rise, and when it rise, it will democratize. They thought China would follow their own pattern of political systems, which never happened. Instead, China, when it does these things, it's long-term thinking. So it had goals that it needed to achieve, which it achieved, and then what we have today is a world, a country that dominates the world in manufacturing, whilst the US manufacturing has actually gone down. China's manufacturing keeps on rising. Initially, they were just manufacturing these little trinkets, things that had no value. But as you look at it now, they are dominating in fields that the West thought it was their preserve. So this is where the world we are in. As a result, I think America soon realized that now they were facing a formidable enemy. So they've changed their whole ethos to say we need to contain China. Otherwise, if China gets to the position where America is and it dominates the world, then China will write the rules of the game. Because we've got what we call in geopolitics the international rules. So if you hear America speak today, it talks of the international rules-based order. But if you dig deep, what they are actually talking about, those international rules-based order is the systems that America itself has put in place. It has done that through the institutions that we see in place in the world today. These include the IMF, World Bank, the UN. That's why you see most of these big multilateral institutions are headquartered in America, because it's the seat of the empire. So if you look at China again, it has started to replicate some of those institutions in its own country, because that's where everyone now is going to start going to in order to worship the empire, to per se, to say. So this has always happened in the world history. Even in Africa, you had one powerful king, and all the other kings would come to pay homage to him. Sometimes I laugh, when I see people saying, "Oh, why are all African leaders going to China?" Or "Why are all African leaders going to the US?" This is historical. Even if you go back into the way our politics was conducted as Africans before the colonization, this is how politics used to be conducted. You had this powerful king, and all the other kings who were subject to him, they used to come and pay homage to him. So this is where we are in world politics, to say we have got power, US now being challenged by China.
So you are telling me actually in Africa we have got historically been actually kingdoms that used to dominate the region, like what China, what the US is doing to the world.
Yes, precisely, because human history doesn't change. This is the good thing about being a student of history. We humans, we change very, I could say we rarely change in the way we do things, the way we conduct ourselves. We might have cell phones now and all these latest gadgets, but our brain hasn't changed that much. So what you'll find is the way we have always conducted world affairs remains particularly the same. So what was happening in Africa, let's take, for example, Munumtapa Empire, which we have Great Zimbabwe now. If you see, there were kings that were paying homage to the emperor. So what they would do is the emperor would say, oh, maybe set a date to say, I want all the kings in my kingdom to come so that we can discuss some matters of concern. So everyone has got to go there and pay homage. A lot that a lot of people don't understand is after the end of the Second World War, there's what we call vassal states. So vassal states, what America did is most of its potent enemies after the Second World War, it made sure it subjugated them. So these are countries like Japan, which ended up with a pacifist constitution where they were not allowed to have a military. So America said, you're not going to have a military, but we'll give you the protection, the security guarantee and the protection. That's why if you go to Japan now, there's one of the biggest military bases for America. You go to South Korea, same thing. You go to Italy, you go to Germany. So America did it. So in geopolitics, or even in our own politics, those are called vassal states. They are controlled by the empire. It's not very apparent. You think they are sovereign, but they are not really sovereign because they do what the empire wants.
Yeah, thank you, Shumba. You have given us the global picture, and I think our viewers would be very willing to know where Zimbabwe, as it stands now, sits, and so that we may zero in to what is on the minds of most Zimbabweans, and most likely most of the people who are listening. And to those who are listening, if you have got any questions that you want Shumba to respond to, no question is stupid. You can put it in the chat box, and we will get him to respond in this live stream. Go on, Shumba.
Yeah, so where Zimbabwe sits in is, I always say, borders are drawn by the powerful. Borders are shifting sand drawn by the powerful. That's the analogy that I always want to use. What do I mean by that? We always think the borders that we have today are permanent or have always been there. That's not the fact. If we look at Zimbabwe, when we talk of Zimbabwe, it was a creation, a colonial construct. It was created when we talk of our history, 1896, the pioneer column coming into Zimbabwe, and that's when we starting to see the formation of Rhodesia, which eventually takes the form of Zimbabwe. But before that, even earlier than that, if you look at how Munumtapa used to stretch to the shores of Mozambique, right? So when the Portuguese came, they actually had fights as well until they conquered parts of Munumtapa, and they were fighting the kings in Manicaland coming inwards. So until they put a line to say this is our territory now. That's what we call Mozambique today. That time Mozambique was an empire. It was way before the British had their own British Empire. So if you go back to history, you'll find that you had the Portuguese Empire, Spanish Empire, and then the British Empire. So these empires, normally whoever sort of gets to run the world, the world map is drawn according to their needs. It's like today we hear Trump saying, we think he's mad when he say, oh, Canada is going to be the is it the 50th first state of America, and we think the man is crazy. But the US is an empire, and it can make those demands. Canada can kick and scream, but if Trump is serious and it becomes the policy of the United States, That's going to happen, and that will be a redrawing of the map, and Canada ceases to exist. The same, like now, is named Gulf of Mexico. It's now Gulf of America. We can we can scream, but that's the reality, because this world is ruled by those who've got the powerful military. So the empire always has got the biggest gun of everyone else. So we all abide by the rules of who is running the empire.
Right. I just want to let you know, someone from the Bagudare says, "Great Shumba, one Shumba."
Thanks so much. Yeah.
Zviri kubva kuWhatsApp iri padare revarume. Right. Let's unpack the dynamics that are happening in Zimbabwe at the moment, because I think a lot of people might want to understand. I think a lot. It's like people are thinking in binary. Either you think of what is happening and what is going to happen next, and either you are for or you are against. So I think you might bring some perspective to what is happening in Zimbabwe today.
Yeah, so I think before I do that, we continue with. I was talking about empires rewriting the maps or redrawing the maps of the world. So now, I think yesterday, was it even today, when J.D. Vance, the Vice President of America, went to Greenland. They want to take Greenland. It's a territory of Denmark, but America wants to take it to be its own, because it's rich in oil, it's rich in everything, and also for its security concerns, because the China and Russia are beginning to be playing around Greenland, and America feels that that's a threat. So they're beginning to say they need Greenland for their own security concerns, because they're not going to wait till maybe Russia has established something there, which is so close to America. So this is where people need to understand how geopolitics. The problem with the geopolitics is we don't have a referee, like within an internal country where we have got a government that says, let's do this. There's no world government that governs the relations of nations. So as a result, whether we like it or not, a bully is sort of sometimes that necessary to sort of hold things together. So the world we are going into now is multipolar. And how does Zimbabwe fit into that? So when I look at Zimbabwe, like I said, it's a colonial construct, right? It's not given that Zimbabwe will always exist. It's like Ukraine. People think Ukraine will always exist. We have had Syria now. For me, from the patterns that I see, Syria will cease to exist, because already Turkey is thinking of recreating the Ottoman Empire. So Syria formerly was part of the Ottoman Empire and might be sucked back into Turkey. And Israel already is claiming part of Syria in order to create its own project called Greater Israel. So that's where we are as well. So in Zimbabwe, we need to be cognizant of the fact that the world is ruled by the powerful, and it's their interests that matter. If they see Zimbabwe that it's of strategic importance in this global geofight between China and the US, there'll be some mechanizations in order to see who will win Zimbabwe as a strategic sort of place. And we don't know where it will end. I always tell people that if you look at the history of Zimbabwe, there was a time that Zimbabwe was in the Union of South Africa. And there was a referendum, and the whites who were in Rhodesia then, they said no, they don't want to be part of the Union of South Africa. That's why we ended up with a Rhodesia. Otherwise, Zimbabwe could have ended up being probably a province of South Africa. So history is always changing. So we don't expect that Zimbabwe will always be like this. So those are the things that if we are going into history, let's read and understand how these geopolitics play about. One other element I want to add, what I find very disturbing, especially when we talk about our leaders in Africa, I think they are not sort of empire builders. What do I mean by that? You find that I'm talking about Rhodesia initially being in the Union of South Africa. Those all were experiments that the white people who came to Zimbabwe were experimenting with. What happened after Rhodesia came out of the Union of South Africa? They also experimented with the Federation of Zimbabwe, Zambia, and Malawi. Yeah, but since we got our independence in Southern Africa, none of that experimentation has happened with the politics. I always say SADC or Southern Africa is the least populated place in the world. And really, for your economies to run, by now we should have been talking maybe of one passport within that region, so that we can exploit population scales, so that we can really begin to have meaningful development and progress within the region. But we have maintained those colonial constructs to the benefit of just a few people, like who wants to be sort of kept. They want to remain holding to those colonial constructs as their own sort of territories. But we should think outside the box and say, what exactly does it mean to the people of Southern Africa? As the world changes, are we changing with the world? So right now, what you'll find is you've got people from you've got Europe, it's rearming after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. You've got America itself is rearming. Most of the world, I can say, is rearming. Are we rearming in Africa? And the world we are going into right now is a world of hard power. Those with the hard power will lay the rules of the game. So it's unfortunate now, as I come to the situation, to address your question about the situation in Zimbabwe. I think what's happening in Zimbabwe is very unfortunate, because we shouldn't be really talking about such things which put our statehood at a vulnerable position. Because the world right now, the world we are going into, it's a bifurcated world. What do I mean by that? I mean, the supply chains of the world are being split into two, because America has realized now, and Europe, they've realized, no, you can't rely on China to make things for you. So they've got a term they are using, which is called reshoring. When they talk of reshoring, it means those things they used to produce in China, now they are thinking, if things go wrong and we go to war with China, China can easily stop the exportation of those materials, because America has already done it. America saw that China was gaining momentum in the world of AI, in the world of technology. So what did America do? It came up with the CHIPS Act. And what does the CHIPS Act do? Restrict China's access to computer chips from America. So So China is not going to be, it's also going to play that game. Let's say there's a war. China is going to start saying they are not exporting this to the Western world. And it happened during the COVID. I think the COVID actually woke up the Western world because they were going looking for all the things that were needed during COVID times. But it's only China who was producing this at mass scale. So they struggled now to procure most of those things. And then that's when they realized their vulnerability. And they started talked about reshoring. And the way China is producing things now, it's a threat to them. So my point in all that is this: the world we are moving in is resource hungry. And where are most resources found? It's in Africa. So the most Europeans or Western world, the powerful countries in the world like Turkey, India, China, they are all looking to Africa to secure their resources because there's no more trust in the world. Each country now want to guarantee its future and security. So they are going to manufacture things within their borders. They're going to manufacture their own arms, and they need those resources. So where are most of those resources found? It's in Africa. And one of those countries is unfortunately our own country. And it doesn't help that we start fighting amongst each other at this crucial time in history. So we're putting the nation at risk with what we are doing, because now external players can come in and engineer the outcome that they want from our the way we are doing things, and then who knows how it will all end. It will be unfortunate for us if we cannot find solutions to our current problems, because we'll end up in a worse situation than exists today.
So, Shumba, if you were given the opportunity to prescribe a solution to our current situation in Zimbabwe, what would it be?
No, I think the situation in Zimbabwe, to be honest, is just greediness. Without there's no vision in Zimbabwe. Unfortunately, it's on both sides of the divide. You have got an opposition with no vision for the future of the nation, and then you've got a tired party, which is ZANU-PF, which to me also has not offered any vision for the country. So as a result, all that we are seeing is the greediness of people. I call it politics. Zedumbu is at the forefront of all this. There's no national vision of where we want to go as a nation. You know, I was listening to this guy. He's a businessman in South Africa. His name is Peter John.
Mm-hmm.
Unbeknown to me, he said there are only 3 people that built South Africa. And he names the Oppenheimer, and then he names John Smart, and then he talks of this guy called Hendrik van Biel. And when you look at those 3, John Smart especially, because Oppenheimer was good with finance, he could pull in the finance that was needed. And John Smart was the leader. And then this guy, Hendrik, was South African, but he had moved to Germany. But because he was extremely good, America enticed him to move from Germany to America. And John Smart went to America to take this guy, because he knew his potential. when he came back to South Africa, he's the guy who built most of the big industry you talk of in South Africa. Yeah. So you don't need a lot of people to have a national vision. You need very few people to drive that national vision. So what we are doing with what's going on, I think these are just the symptoms of what of lack of leadership of where we want to go as a nation. Everyone who is coming into leadership is just there to protect their interests. This is where, if you look what Lee Kuan Yew, the leader of Singapore, once said, to say the third world, the problem is the families start to privatize, ministers privatize wealth, and you've got the leaders and their families and everyone benefiting from the resources the public pays at the expense of everyone else. And if these things are mentioned, it seems it's an attack on the government. People are not allowed to talk about it. But we need to come collectively to solve Zimbabwe's problems. And the way we do solve Zimbabwe's problems is having a vision for the future. Where do we want Zimbabwe to be in 20 years? Where do we want Zimbabwe to be in 50 years? And where do we want Zimbabwe to be in 100 years? We solve the infrastructure problems. We solve the energy problems. There's no country that can run without energy. Energy is at the heart of everything that we do. Even me as an individual, I've got to get up every morning and eat. As a country also needs to eat. What the country eats is energy. So you need to have that energy, and then you need the blood vessels, which are the roads, the infrastructure, to feed that, to feed the whole body of the nation. But you also need a vision now to say, how am I gonna hunt for me to feed? This is what the vision that is lacking within our community or our nation. We've got politicians who are interested in their short-term survival, who don't see past their stomachs. So that's where the problem is. And for me to solve this issue, we just need mature adults on the table to say things have not worked from 1980. Let's sit on the table and redraw where we want to go as a nation. We need to find each other. The more we go at each other, calling each other enemies, the more things are gonna get worse, and the more Zimbabwe will slide into an ABC, and things can even take a dark turn. So I'm hoping that people wake up to this reality and stop calling each other enemies. Sit down on the table as adults and see how they can solve the crisis that we have. There's no, I could say, the idea of having your egos espoused, or you want your ego to be the one that rules the day. Unfortunately, it's not gonna work this time. People need to be mature and sit down at the table and talk about these things, no matter how tough it's going to be, unfortunately.
That's a powerful statement. Politics the dumbo, and we need to find each other. But we only have got an hour to the 31st of March, where the die is cast to say everybody down tools to change the situation. What your take on that?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, to be honest, because to me, this has been allowed to fester. Because I think within ZANU-PF, they could have handled this matter and nip it in the bud as early as possible. Because this disgruntlement is just I think if you sort of think this disgruntlement is without merit, I think those in power are really getting it wrong. People are disgruntled. Things are not working in Zimbabwe. The hospitals are not working. The infrastructure is not working for everyone. The taxes, Zimbabwe needs a lot of deregulation in most areas because taxes are being heaped. You've got rent seekers who are just piling taxes upon taxes on the people of Zimbabwe. And these taxes, if they were doing anything to aid the development of the country, there's no development to show for that rent-seeking behavior. So people are really at teether's end to say, is this going to be the future? People cannot eat promises to say, oh, we're gonna do. We have had all these programs since 1980 where we say education for all 2010, education health for all 2015, but nothing has come out of it. So it's time to really sit down and say, where have we gone wrong? How can we fix it? And how can we start working for the benefit of all Zimbabweans? And until we get to that point and we scale down on our egos to say, oh, we are in the right, those who are doing this are, I just beg both sides to say, really, just come to the table and talk this thing over. Otherwise, you are putting the whole nation at risk.
Now, just to on this one, we have got a president who is saying he is dismissing as a non-event, and we have got a minister of state security, Love Moma Tutu, still downplaying it, and the vice president Constantino Chiwenga refusing that there's no discontent within the ruling party. From the ruling party we are seeing all denial, and we see also in the religious sector people equating people who are opposing to Mnangagwa as against the divine will. In the opposition, we have got of course the leading Bombshell Geza outlining all the ills, and some opposition leaders distancing themselves, primarily the former CC leader Nelson Chamisa. What's your take on this sentiment of those leading us?
Yeah, it just shows lack of leadership in our country, unfortunately. Because in a country you need those neutral voices with that credibility of leadership who can put these heads together to say, guys, you need to wake up to the reality of where you are taking the nation. These denials can be there, and they are based on the assumption that things will always work, those in power will always defend. But that works until it doesn't. That's the problem. So for me, I think the genie is out of the bottle. So whether they deny that there's no discontent, everyone knows there's discontent. And for them not to address it, I think, and take people as enemies, I think they are adults. We respect them, even the war veterans, we respect for the sacrifices they've made. But I think there's a way of coming together to put your ideas and your frustrations in a credible manner. I think now we have people we are thinking, no, they cannot talk to each other. At the end of the day, for you to solve issues, you will have to talk. This is what we are seeing with Trump, the Trump's approach to the Ukraine crisis. Because Ukraine didn't want to talk to Russia, Europe didn't want to talk to Russia. Here comes Trump. He said, no, we're gonna talk to Russia for this thing to end. So whether we like it or not, Zimbabwe is the only thing that we've got. And if we mess up big. My fear is, Misha, my greatest fear is we putting the country at risk. The country becomes vulnerable. Zimbabwe, if I think you have had talks in the House of Lords here in the UK, you have had talks in the UK Parliament. They say Zimbabwe is strategically positioned in Africa. They're not even talking of the minerals that we have. They're just talking of the position. So if these people, if they see that we are already split, we can't manage our own affairs, they're gonna come and engineer something so that they have total control of that strategic asset, which is Zimbabwe. So all I beg to our leaders is they need to swallow their pride. It doesn't really matter that everyone is trying to talk how powerful they are or how good they are. At the end of the day, it's either we go down the route of implosion as a nation, or we sit down and talk these things over. And those things that needs to be ironed out needs to be ironed out. I think it should be paramount to the leadership that the population is frustrated. The population feels the cake is being eaten by a few. The cake needs to be spread so that every Zimbabwean everywhere needs to feel that they've got part to be enjoying the fruits of our independence or the fruits of our country. In 1980, we were happy we got our independence. So let's show that independence translates into the good living for our people. Zimbabwe is extremely rich. It's endowed with human resource, with mineral resource, and agricultural resources, which can make it a well-advanced country. So all we need is the brains that are gonna lead that sort of development, so that we put the country on a trajectory that every Zimbabwean can enjoy, and people look forward to go back home, or they feel like Zimbabwe is their home. The problem with us, unlike most of our white counterparts, what you'll find is someone might be white in Australia, but they hold maybe 4 passports. They'll be holding a US passport, a British passport, an Australian passport, and maybe a Zimbabwean passport. If anything goes wrong anywhere they are in the world, they've got an alternative to go. That's why even in the UK, you've got ancestral, a white guy who's grown up in Zimbabwe. As long as he got an ancestral connection to the UK, he can apply to come back here as a British citizen. But you cannot say that to a Zimbabwean. We've got only one home. Let's make it livable, and our people to enjoy that freedom and wealth that our country offers.
Thank you. Let me speak to our national leaders. We have raised quite a number of strategic points. One is, you said, in the House of Lords and the House of Parliament here in the United Kingdom, they've discussed and they've said Zimbabwe is a strategic asset. This is not the first time. I think before our colonization, there was someone from the House of Lords who traveled Africa And when he came and reported, he said he had walked the uh, breadth and everywhere in Africa, and he has not found anyone who is poor. That was the observation at that time. And they had to devise a strategy of how can we break these nations who are so powerful so that they can take over. So, as you have said, they might be actually looking at how can they get this cake. And then to our leaders, can they see the value of our land and find it worthy sitting down and talk their difference? Coming back to you, Shumba, you have said that we need a neutral voice. How do we find a neutral voice in a turmoil environment like we are now?
This is the issue, you know. This is the issue because our politics became so toxic and intimidating that those neutral voices that are supposed to lead the nation, these are not political figures. We had, I think we had one Professor Makumbe, who was just a neutral voice, just giving his sort of ideas of how things should work. I think South Africa also is at the same crisis, because you remember in South Africa we had Desmond Tutu.
Mhm.
Those are the voices that you need, that are always the voice of conscience within a society. Who are not who are sort of apolitical. They are not for the opposition. They are not for the ruling party, but they are in the middle. When they see the ruling party doing wrong things, they can stand up and say as it is. When they see the opposition doing the wrong things, they can stand up and also castigate on them on that. So that voice is no longer there in Zimbabwe, unfortunately. So that's where we are, and it's a dilemma, because that voice, if it was there at this time, those are the voices that are going to rise to say, guys, what you are doing is dangerous, because this is really dangerous stuff. They might want to put it under the carpet, but to me, it's not something that you can hide under the carpet. That's where we are in the history of Zimbabwe. So these people, we need a neutral voice. I think you remember what happened 2017.
Yep.
You, who was that reverend who sort of
Mkonore.
Mkonori? Those are the people that we want, but also we want someone with a voice, someone who the Zimbabweans can say, this guy is neutral, he's respectful, he's always talking about social issues, whether it's criticizing the government to say they need to address social issues, whether it's criticizing the opposition. It's when you see the opposition running down cities, people want to turn a blind eye to that, but you need a middle voice to say, the opposition, what you are doing with the cities is improper. You cannot be collecting money from the people and not offering the services. What are you in the office for? And then the same applies to the ruling party. There are certain objectives since 1980 they've not met. And there are certain things that they could have done to secure the future of the nation, which they never did. Like I told you, I'm from monetary economics. I always say there were so many ways for us to fight the sanctions that were imposed upon us. But the imposition of sanctions was a declaration of war. What do you do when a war is declared on you? You get your best brains on the table to fight back against that situation. So you needed your best brains to formulate a counter strategy to those sanctions, rather than you crying that, oh, sanctions. Actually, some countries actually develop during those sanctions if you put your best brains on the table. So this is what we are saying. We need a neutral voice who is gonna talk reason to both sides, because these egos that, oh, we are the ruling party, nobody's going to challenge us. It's going to work until it doesn't work. And also for those on the other side who thinks like they can just bring the state down, it might not happen as you think. And at the end of the day, we might end up with a situation that is worse than what we thought we could have. And maybe we have seen this movie playing in the region before. I worked in the government myself, and I know at one time I was involved with the repatriation of Mozambican refugees. So I'm talking of an experience of a civil war that was in Mozambique because of these leadership crises. So we need to be very careful how we manage state affairs. Otherwise, we put the country in a very in a terrible situation, or in a position that we're not gonna go back. People are anxious. So it's up to the leaders to come out and say, no, don't be anxious. Things are going to be sorted. We're going to talk to each other, find each other, and see a way forward out of this mess. I think that would be my advice.
You've mentioned that when you are in a war, you bring your best brains on the table. What if the country, the best brain is gone abroad, like yourself? You could have been one on that table that you have devised a plan that will bust the sanctions.
Yeah, always you acknowledge your talent everywhere. This is what we are talking about, that leadership has been lacking in Zimbabwe per se, because you need to know where your talent is across the world. You need to identify talent within your country. That's why for someone in the UK or someone in America, you find these exceptional individuals. In the UK, they call them sirs. You see, Sir so and so. Even the prime minister is Sir Keir Starmer. Why do they call him Sir? It's because he's got expertise on a certain area that even the government wants sort of just knowledge or any advice on certain aspects. They go to that person. There are people, if you remember during COVID, you had those, the country was actually being managed by a group of scientists. It's acknowledging the knowledge that you have within your country and saying, when you hit a crisis, you need those people to be on the table to help you. So if you go to America, you have what they call the Council of Economic Advisors. These are the people, I think about 20 of them, top American economists. The president goes to them, what can I do about this? I've got this situation, can you help me? And they advise the president. He's free to take his own advice. But I think we need to get to that point that not everyone knows everything. For us to move on as a nation, we need to rebuild our institutions. And one important thing that I think that's missing as well, we need think tanks in Zimbabwe, which touches on different subjects and informs the public and informs the government. This is the secret of success in most countries. And if you go to Singapore, this was the secret of success, and education as well. Because it pains me now, if you see the teacher's salary, teachers should be the highest. You go to Norway, I think teachers are the highest paid civil servants in Norway. because you are valuing the education of your future generations. So let's start working on those things that change the trajectory of the nation. Politics dzedumbu hakuna kwedzinotiendesa. We need to change that mindset and really think of how we can build a Zimbabwe that serves its people, not a Zimbabwe that serves the interests of the few.
You mentioned about rebuilding institutions. We have got the judicial system, we have got the security system. Are those not institutions?
No, they are institutions, but you know, there's there are certain things that when I look at, you know, since 1980, sometimes we did half jobs, half measures. We really didn't do. We needed to do a wholesale uprooting of the system that was there and replace it with our own systems that serves. I could say the leadership tried in certain instances, especially when it came to education. I think I'll give Mugabe that credit that he tried in terms of education. We might see things differently. There are people who say he didn't try anything or what, but to me, I was in high school. I saw libraries being built. I think I went to Mukai High School in Highfield. During when I was in my Form 3, there was this massive library built at Machipisa. And when you went in there, it was top of the range library. You know, you feel that, oh, you sit there, you are studying, and you could see the hunger of Zimbabweans to read, our age group. So there are certain of those things that needs improvement. Institutions are there, but I think because of this rent-seeking behavior and this, most of them have been hollowed out, and some of them, they've not really functioned to save the Zimbabwean people, because these were institutions built for a few, for the minority, but they never really changed to reflect the new reality that we were now in 1980. The majority were now in power. They needed to be inclusive of the majority now, but that was lacking.
We have been an hour on this platform, and I think this is just the beginning of a powerful conversation like this, and I think we are going to schedule another one depending on your availability. Is there anything, the final word you may want to say, one, to the leadership, and two, to people who are thinking of what are they going to do tomorrow, because tomorrow is the 31st. The war veterans has asked them to go on the streets, and the government are saying tomorrow will be business as usual.
Yeah, it's just to help my people, to be honest, to be on the lookout of to do what's best with them. I think government can give those reassurances, because it's the role of the state to do that. And it's unfortunate we are at this juncture when things could have been talked over. This is what I'm saying. The situation we are in, it shows lack of leadership. And it's also pointing us that we need social leaders, not just leaders in politics. We need voices that can talk to situations that are in the country, talk of social issues, talk of security matters, talk of food issues, talk of all issues that pertain to the advancement and the development of Zimbabwe. And they shouldn't fear that their voices will be silenced. as long as they are talking about things that relate to the future of Zimbabwe. They are not talking about politics, who is supposed to go in there or what. As long as they remain apolitical, I think they should be accorded that voice, so that, this is why cars have got those mirrors, side view mirrors. You're looking at the blind spots, right? A government can have blind spots. That's why I was talking of think tanks and institution or institutes within a country. Those are rear view mirrors that help with things like blind spots. So no one knows everything, like I've said before. So there's no need for arrogance to say we know all, we're gonna control the situation, because already the situation has not been controlled. So I think the best that the government of Zimbabwe and the war veterans can do for the people of Zimbabwe is to come back to the table and talk this thing over, find each other and see how they can solve this thing to the benefit of Zimbabwe. And we as the citizens, we need not to keep on stoking fires. We should be there really to encourage this dialogue. And also, encouraging this dialogue, I'm not meaning then that we just ignore the things that people are grumbling with. We need things to be addressed. We need the healthcare to be sorted out. We need the economy to be sorted out. We need the jobs to be sorted out. In fact, my suggestion on the job front was Zimbabwe needs a new deal. If anyone knows what a new deal is, which is it the president of America did after the Great Depression. He came up with a new deal. We need a new deal for Zimbabwe to address the issue of unemployment. And that new deal will help us to address the issues of infrastructure building within our country. So the future is bright. It just needs the leadership who can take us there to make us believe in a future that's possible. I think that's all I can say for now. I only pray for my country and hope people are not anxious and people act in a responsible manner. And when you feel like the situation is out of hand, make sure you are safe. So that's all I pray for my people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I think you have given me a task. We need a neutral voice, and I think we will try by all means to find those neutral voice to come on this Champion Network broadcast. So if you think you have got something to offer and you can come on broadcast like Shumba Nasi, the numbers are shown on the screen. Reach out, we can have a conversation, and we can put in some seeds of hope to our people and to our nation. So thank you, Shumba, and this ends our broadcast.
Oh, thank you.